All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Whoever is going to be joining and listening to the guest of the day, welcome to Leaders in Library Season 4. You have heard many leaders coming across different seasons, and today we have yet another guest of the day. Uh, Before I hand over the conversation completely to her, who's going to drive it for us, let me have the honor of formally introducing her. And today we have Aarti Kelshikar with us, an acclaimed author with two books up her sleeve, which have become bestsellers on the platform of books and that particular space. And today I'm going to talk about the second book of hers, which recently came out. She is a globally acclaimed intercultural coach with a certification from the Cultural Intelligence Center US. And I didn't know this RTA, an institute exists like this till I saw your profile. It went and did some research on that. She's an executive coach, does a lot of work in the space of organization development, culture transformation, etc. An avid book lover, obviously, an author to Hona Hi Chahiye. And I'm so glad to have you, Aarti. And she was introduced to me by Shiv Shivkumar, that most of you know on LinkedIn as a global leader, an HR, what do I say, leader, and also an avid book lover plus an author. So go and pick up his books and read. So thanks, Shiv, for getting me introduced to Aarti. Aarti, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for accepting and joining the show.
Thanks, Rajiv. Lovely to be here. And, as you mentioned, I think we have a lot of people in common, and I'm sure it will continue that way. So, lovely to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely. Superb, superb. So I'm going to straight away jump into the conversation on the book. But before we get into a couple of things that intrigued me as I read, and I've got three, four areas that I want to talk with you. I want to know, how did books happen to you, and how did the journey of a corporate woman and a book lover become an author? How did this happen
Yeah.
here?
So, so I think I always liked books and I always liked to read and write.
Mhm,
Growing up, I loved going to libraries and getting books as gifts and things like that. I wanted to be a journalist,
mhm,
but for a number of reasons, I went with the flow. In that time, we didn't really have so much of career counseling and things like
mhm.
that. And
Exactly.
I went ahead and did my commerce, then an MBA in finance, then got into regulatory compliance, worked with SEBI, worked with a consulting firm in Singapore, and so went about the flow and didn't really think too much about my first love, which was to write. And many years later, an idea came along when we moved back to India from the
Mhm,
Philippines, and I realized that the first book, which was How India Works, I realized that there was an opportunity to write that book, and
mhm.
it would be have been interesting, and I just jumped at it, with everything that I had. And I think, as a friend told me later, she said that it was almost like, life was preparing you with all these different experiences so that you would finally do what you really wanted to do, which was really your passion. So, yeah, so that's how. I wouldn't say I was an accidental writer, because I think that was always close to my heart and it was always something I wanted to do. But in terms of the topic and the theme that I began to write on, which is this whole
Mhm.
space of leadership culture,
Yeah.
which is really niche,
Mm.
I think that happened just very organically, and because I reinvented the wheel a couple of times.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so that's how that whole journey started. And as you
How
mentioned,
lovely.
I've written one book and now a second. Yeah.
How lovely. And I'm so happy to have you, Aarti, because you are the second author on this season. So such a pleasure to have you. And with all humility, I want to submit this to you and also to the audience, that I'm a book lover and I read so many books. But I always wonder, how do you guys have this ability to write it and create such deep thinking shifts in people like us? It is magnificent. People tell me, Rajiv, aap kab likhne wale ho? And I said, I don't know if I have the muzzle in me to write it, but when I listen to people like you, it's so inspiring. It's magnificent. Seriously. Right.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you that I'm so happy to talk on this book, guys. We're going to talk on the book called How Women Work. Pick up the book. I don't have the book here with me. I left it at home. I should have carried it to show it to you on the show. But go to Amazon, pick up this book. It's a great book on people from the Asian side and Eastern world and how do they think, especially women. And I think I love this book for two reasons. One, it's very simple English. And it's
Sorry?
so simple English, so lucid and fluid for anybody to understand. But more than that, what I loved is You have touched on leadership, on women, on paradigms, perspectives, multiple elements. What I liked is it is so statistically driven. There is so much of data and facts proven that one cannot contest it. I just loved it. और मैं पेन लेके हर किताब में नोट कर हर पन्ने में ये मार्क कर लेते हैं ये डेटा इंपॉर्टेंट है इसको नोट कर लेते हैं इट वाज ब्यूटीफुल ग्रेट वर्क रियली ग्रेट
Yeah, yeah. And that's been the feedback that I've got because people think, chalo, it's a book on women leadership. So they are expecting something different. And then you suddenly realize that there is, it's layered, it's nuanced. So
yeah
suddenly you're getting into some anecdote, then you're getting into some insight from somewhere. And then there's a Forbes article on research, which is kind of coming in. So it was a combination of approaches, I think, and a combination of interests, because I really didn't want it to be just another book, on women and women leadership. I wanted to make it as rich and as interesting as I possibly could, so I
yeah
think that is how I was driven to write this. Yeah.
yeah. When I read the book, I was remembering How Woman Rise by Marshall Goldsmith, one another classic book that I read. Yours was equally inspiring. All right, so let's start with the first question. I want to pick up your thoughts on this area that you spoke in the book, which is courage and vulnerability. Give us some insights from the world of women leadership. We know these two words generally from a leadership definition, but I want to get it from you from a paradigm of woman and her growth into the leadership space.
Yeah. And so I think the definition of courageous leadership has evolved, right? So it's no longer about being, the smartest, toughest, loudest person in a room or on a table. I'll share a couple of examples. One that really spoke to me was a quote from Vanita Narayanan. Okay,
Mm,
she used to head IBM in India. And, one of the most down-to-earth people that I had a good fortune to connect with for my book.
mm,
And she mentioned that, when I look at being effective, I've never been intimidated by having people on my team that are smarter than me. And
mm,
I thought, here is a statement of courage, okay, of security, of by somebody, because especially in the Indian context or the Asian context, where
mm,
a leader is put on a pedestal, a leader is, expected to know the answers.
yeah,
People really like, how many leaders do you know who really are okay with their team members saying, hey, I don't agree with you. I don't think
mm,
this is right. Or, even criticizing or challenging them.
yeah,
So I think it really speaks to your level of security and your level of confidence, right? So I felt that that is one great example in terms of just simple courage. It doesn't have to be like you're taking some crusade and, like fighting for anything, right? But it's
absolutely.
about just being so confident as a leader, as a woman leader.
Mm,
So that's one example. The other one that I really like also, and which I think would be nice to mention, is about Pavitra Singh, who
mm,
is CHRO of PepsiCo. And
mm,
she mentioned how, when the pandemic struck,
mm,
nobody knew what to do, right? Nobody had the
yeah,
answers. I mean, we all have been, wondering. It's been a very unscripted kind of a situation. And
correct.
she says, yeah, and she says that, she very openly shared her vulnerability. And she
Mm,
said, look, I don't know, I don't have the answers. And she, in fact, reached out to her team members and said, let's come up with the best ideas together because we're
lovely.
all in it together,
Correct.
And she said that that won her a lot of brownie points because, she had newly taken over this role and she
Mm,
could have very well said, hey, I've thought about this and these are the three things that I want to do and,
mm,
things like that. But she said it really helped her, be more likable, be more approachable.
yeah.
So that was a great example of vulnerability. But having said that, I think it's important to caveat this and say that while it's great to be vulnerable, I think
Mm,
especially in the Indian context, there is a time and a place to be
mm,
vulnerable,
right.
because you have to be careful as a leader because the conventional perception in India is of being a strong leader, like almost like a superhero who knows the answers and who has
Yeah.
never failed. So COVID is one situation, but now COVID is gone. But in a normal, regular business situation, Do we really want to express, vulnerability or not knowing the answers? So it really depends. And you have to be careful, especially as a woman leader, because you don't want your gender to be called out. I mean, that
Yeah.
is like the worst thing that could happen. So I think it depends on the situation. It depends on the maturity of the team. It depends on the culture of the organization. And
Hmm.
all of these factors work together, then of course you can be vulnerable.
Very true. Very true. I think you rightly said because I don't know why people expect leaders to become the Avengers.
Yeah.
I'm going to save the world. You are not the Iron Man or the Captain America. You don't need to be or the Wonder Woman. You can just
Yeah.
be the leader who has come to that particular position because of some great work and experience in the past. And today, you're
Yeah.
expected to deliver like a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like your analogy. Yeah, that's true.
Very true. I was just thinking when you told me Chitra Singh's story, the moment she went and said this, how inclusive the culture around her would have become, isn't it? People would just jump to help her out. Here is
Yes.
a woman who's figuring out what to do. Let us take our effort to help her and get this successfully done, isn't it? That is such
Yes,
a blessing for
absolutely.
leaders.
It is, it is. And now we see books written on vulnerability and humility and things like that. But sometimes you don't need a book, right? Sometimes you just have that leadership capability, which is so fantastic, which we can all learn from.
Absolutely. Lovely, lovely one. All right, so let's take the conversation to the next area. And this is completely which I did not know at all. So I'm going to just read the question that I've written. You mentioned about malasakit, if I pronounced it correctly, trait of the Filipinos. Tell us what is this trait and how have you experienced this?
Yeah. So, we lived in the Philippines for 5.5 years.
Hmm.
And it's a wonderful country, and people are very, sensitive and fun, and relationships are a big deal, in that part of the world. Now,
Okay.
having said that, relationships are equally important in India and in other places, right? But they tend to focus a lot on words, terms like malasakit, which is basically investing in the well-being of
Mm,
your colleagues and your family members. And this
mm.
is long before well-being became a mantra, after COVID, right?
Uh, uh,
So they're very cognizant of this. They want to make people feel very comfortable.
okay.
And it's not about being man or woman, right?
Mm,
Everybody is very careful. They don't want to rub people the wrong way. They want to take people along in the ride. I spoke to Lynette Ortiz, who was the CEO of Standard Chartered Bank, and she
mm,
said how, every day when she's doing her work,
mm.
she's consciously balance the focus on results and deliverables with making her team feel good and
Uh,
ensuring that they don't feel hurt or sad.
right.
It's a very, very sensitive kind of a culture, and people even cry sometimes, in a working day. So
Okay.
it's a very different ball game, yes. So, but having said that, obviously they do this very well, and
Mm,
empathy is a very well honed skill or capability in the Philippines, and I
okay.
think it's so important, especially today with we're talking about AI and greater technology and
Mm,
logical safety, which has become like a big buzzword. So in
mm.
all of this, I do think that some countries, some cultures, and I think women tend to make for naturally more empathetic leadership styles. Yeah.
Okay.
But having said that, I feel that it's also important for women to balance empathy with rationality,
Mm,
because that's the common perception or the common criticism that is often
mm.
doled out.
Okay.
So, and it was interesting that, as I spoke with a lot of leaders, they describe themselves as being collaborative, but
Yeah.
in same sentence, in the same breath, they added collaborative but decisive, you know.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so whether it was Roshni Nadar Malhotra or whether it was, some of the other Asian leaders. And I found that very interesting because clearly they wanted to be seen as being able to be both firm and empathetic,
Mm,
like
mm,
a generic leadership quality. And another interesting finding, which I've mentioned in the book, is that as women go up the ladder, as per some
mm,
research,
mm.
they tend to display less of empathy and they actually become better at emotional management. You know,
Okay.
I thought that
Okay.
was interesting because, again, maybe to counter some of these biases and perceptions, and
Right.
it seems to be like a skill set that, they have kind of honed and get better at.
Okay. Okay. So my question again onto the same one is, why have you spoken about this in the book? Why is it so pertinent and important for the women leaders? Because being empathetic is natural to them. Malasika probably comes naturally to them that we women always sacrifice themselves for the well-being of the other person, then look at their own benefit. ये तो naturally होता है across the gender. Why is it important for budding young women leaders to look at this element?
I think it's because, women are always classified as being emotional and, being empathetic. But I think the couple of things. One is that, as we grow into this field of leadership and
Mm,
management and everything, I think it's important to celebrate what women are good at. At the
mm,
same time, it's not so simple anymore, right? Because the world out there now is far more complex. So you
right.
can't just say that, oh, empathy. Okay, let's tick the box on empathy and nurturing and malasakit and say, chalo, this is one trait that women have. Now let's
Mm,
move on to trait number two.
mm,
I think increasingly men also will need to be more empathetic. And I think
mm.
COVID has really exposed that. So
Yeah,
it's no longer a bastion of only one particular gender.
correct.
And, so I think we all have to recognize that, embrace that, and
Mm,
find ways of working around it in a way that we're able to add value holistically. So
right,
it's
right.
not just about, okay, I am empathetic with you. It's like,
Mm,
how can I bring that empathy to work in a
mm,
way that can be more supportive, more inclusive, and
mm,
take, the leadership quotient of the
mm.
team and organization to another level, you know?
Ah,
So we
okay.
want to integrate it in our leadership style and spectrum. And, also recognize that it's not just one thing, but it's a part of so many other things. And they all have to work together, to make it
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah. In fact, when I read the pages on this particular topic in the book, my mind went back to the great book written by Indira Nooyi in terms of how did she, in her own journey, went through this empathy side of her as a woman leader, and when she walked in, became a CEO, and she's the only woman amongst men around, and then need to be practical and deliver the business for the organization. So she spoke about her struggle and her successes, in that
Yes.
book. So I was reminded of that when I read this concept in your book. Lovely, lovely. So this naturally takes me to the next question, where you beautifully talk about an element that one of the pitfalls that people should understand, interpret it the right way is being present or perfect. Now, I like the word being present or perfect and not and perfect. So I'm going to ask you as an author to give us some insights on how do you interpret this phrase and why is it so relevant for me or you, for all of us?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, And so I do think this is important, not just for women, but for all of us, right? But first, let me just talk about the women aspect before I move on to a more generic, explanation. So I think with women, especially, because the default leadership model is
Mm,
male largely, I think
mm,
women feel the need to prove themselves, prove they're good, they know their stuff. And I think as long as, it makes you more prepared on top of your game, you've done your homework, I think it's fantastic, right? So a little bit of stress, a little bit of pressure is always good,
correct.
right? The problem is that women tend to go the other way and tend to get so stressed, and they tend to be perfectionists, and they tend to worry and overthink, and it doesn't lead to good things, right? So I think at some point you have to be able to let it go and say, okay, let me be here in this room. Let me not have preconceived notions and ideas, and let me listen to the person and see what is the best way in which I can help here and add value. Yeah.
Right.
In fact, I recently read about this example of Rama Bijapurkar.
Mm,
In a meeting, and apparently every time she's to talk,
mm,
she's worried about that 5% of the audience that may not have warmed up to the talk instead of the 95% that actually enjoyed it, you know. So
Oh,
I think, yeah, so I think it's a very common psychological phenomenon, especially with women, where, you know, they'll focus on that 1%, on that 2%, and not look at the bigger picture. So again, I think it's important to celebrate what you do and, you know, do it well.
yeah,
Um, and I think it's also now moving on to a more generic thing. You know, we see this so often, right? One is in a meeting and then somebody is, you know, on their phone, right?
mm,
Somebody is on their laptop. I mean, who is really present here in this meeting, you know?
true.
And yeah, and you see that, and it's not a nice feeling for the other person, whether you're a client or whether you're in the room,
Yeah,
because the body language that is being, you know, there is that, okay, I have more important things to do. I mean, do I just get on with it, you know? So that's
correct.
not a reassuring feeling. And I think coupled with that, I also feel that, you know, with the younger generation, people don't always pay attention to detail, you know?
Mm, mm,
Everybody in a rush, everyone wants to do everything yesterday. Jugaad, of course, is a cultural phenomenon. And no one wants to, you know, check for accuracy and quality, which I think is like, especially having worked in Southeast Asia, I
mm,
mean, I do feel like that is something that there is so much room for improvement culturally, you know, with us
true,
as
true.
a race. In fact, you know, in my first book, in How India Works, you know, a lot of the foreigners that I interviewed mentioned very jokingly, of course, that you know, they often refer to India as a land of 98%.
Mm,
Okay. You
mm-hmm.
know, and because we've seen that, right? We'll get it right up to 98%, and then one last 2% is just, you know,
चलता है
हाँ,
बॉस.
चलता है. Exactly. But they don't realize that that impacts the whole project's
Oh, it
visibility
does.
and credibility, right?
Yeah.
In fact, you know, I was recently at a talk at an organization where we were a couple of authors, three authors, and they had got the name of one of the author's books wrong. You know, in the invitation, in the, you know, on the screensaver behind, etc. And I just thought it was such a small thing, but it goes to tell you that, you know, where is the attention to detail? Where are we being present, you know, and
Very
perfect,
true. Very
right?
true. Very true.
So, and it's a small thing, but it speaks volumes. So I do feel that as a culture, we
Mm.
need to, you know, address this, and we need to focus on this and not just say chalta hai, you know.
No, I agree. I completely agree with you. You know what saddens me, Aarti, is Jugaad has become a word for the Indians, and unfortunately, उसके नाम पे किताब भी छप गया है.
Yeah.
And today it's not a word with a negative meaning. It's become a positive word saying Indians are so capable to jugaad everything and get it done. I know, and I
Yeah.
can so much relate to you on the book so much, Aarti, because I was fortunate to work in the automobile and the manufacturing industry a lot, and I had very close association with the Japanese and the Germans. And total quality management as a concept is so much into me that what you say is so right. हम लोग वो 2% में मिस कर जाते हैं. And I had so many occasions while working with the Germans and Japanese, I would feel like यार ostrich जैसा गड्ढा खोद के लिए put my head down. I feel so shameful as an Indian. And I'm saying
Yeah.
this with some element of authority as an Indian and not to offend Indians here. We don't have the tenacity to go to the last mile in terms of attention to detail or
Yes.
delivering it. वो नहीं
Yes.
कर पाते, हम क्यों छूट जाते हैं? I just don't get it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we are so good in so many things, and
Yeah,
then, you know, we just miss that final little bit to actually make a, you know, great impression. So
absolutely.
I think that's something that every college student, engineering student, whatever, you know, we really need to focus on this,
Very
you
much.
know, somewhere. Yeah.
Very true, and I agree. I agree. Lovely, lovely. I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, as much as you spoke about being present or perfect, I'm going to ask the next one where you said that women need to make themselves more visible and vocal. And I'm going to give a disclaimer and then ask you for two tips for the women leaders listening to you. Being visible, being vocal, and linking to the earlier question, being present and being perfect. Do you think this is created or generated by the men in the workspace, or is it very self-inflicted thing for the woman? How do you see it? Is my first part of the question. Second, you can respond to the visible and vocal one. Sorry for a long one, huh?
No, no. Okay, so I think it goes hand in hand, right? The two sides to the coin.
Hmm.
I think, sometimes it's because one gender or, the risk of stereotyping, or, there is a tendency for a certain group of people to be far more visible and to, bada chada ke kind of talk, which then by contrast means that the other gender or the other group of people has to rise and has
Right.
to, up the ante.
Yeah.
So I think that's one side. And then the other side is also that women tend to, by nature, always minimize what they're doing and not, and, feel that, okay, my work will speak. Why do I have to speak? So
Yeah.
I think that tends to be a quality.
Hmm.
And frankly, I see nothing wrong in that. I'm not one of those very flamboyant kind of people in any case. I do believe that your work speaks for itself. But, sometimes there's nothing wrong in speaking a little bit about yourself, whether it's on social
Yeah.
media, and just sharing it just so that it reaches the right audience and the right messaging, for the right groups. I think,
Yeah.
so it's not about saying you're the best person in the world and that, the smartest or whatever, but it's just
Yeah.
about reaching the people who you want to reach,
Very
and
true. Very true.
yeah, and I think that's been my journey also, as an author for the last few months, because by nature I'm a reticent person, and I've really had to go all out on social media and to be more visible and vocal, not because I want the book to be a bestseller, but because I just want more people to hear about it and read about it. And if they think it's
Yeah.
good, it's fine. If they think it's not good, that's fine
Then
as
it will naturally become a bestseller if people like it.
Yes, exactly. But the thing is, but you have to be able to, open yourself. And, it's very tough because as an author, you're anyway putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Then now you're taking it to the next level where on social media, you're kind of talking about it and being more visible and being more vocal. So in a sense, I've actually, this really resonates because I've been doing some of it in the last few months, and it's not
Lovely.
easy. And
Lovely.
yes, and people can talk, and you have all kinds of things happening. But
Yeah.
I do think that it's important to be able to, share what you're all about, and so
Mm.
that people know, and to, add to work on your core expertise and to
Mm.
develop a brand.
Yeah.
I think that's very important because what do you stand for, finally, and what do people then know you for? Is it
Correct.
about, a particular book? Is it about a genre? What are the things that can be expected to be, resonating with you? So I think these
Right.
are some things that, and then it becomes a very logical extension of your personality. And then people understand that, okay, if it is about culture, I'll go to this person. Or if it is about good quality writing, I will go to this person. So there is a certain level of expectation and a certain level of consistency that you display in your work, which
Mm.
then becomes something that people know you for and expect you for.
True, true. So if we were to summarize this question, what are the two tips? One, you're saying stand for the brand and quality that you represent. And what's the second one?
I think the second person would be to keep skilling and reskilling and invest in your own learning.
Okay, okay.
Because you can't just say, okay, I did something 5 years ago and now I'm on top of the game. It doesn't work.
It doesn't
So
work.
you have to keep being relevant, and you have to keep bringing and establishing that wow factor. What is great about you, finally.
So reskilling and also speaking about what you stand for, that you're good at, are two important tips for women leaders to be present,
Yes,
visible, and also vocalize it for their own good, isn't it?
yes, yes.
You rightly said, you were making noise in the social media not because you wanted the book to be a bestseller, but you wanted more people to read it and get the benefit of all the research work that you have done. वरना बहुत लोग miss कर जाते हैं, right? This
Yes,
talk today is also not to sell you or sell me. This is a talk that can go on the platform that can nudge many people who have not picked the book to go and pick it up and get the
yes,
benefit.
yes. And to get them to open their minds and think about different aspects, right? I mean,
Very true.
finally, why does one, engage in conversations like this? To be able to add value and to be able to raise the bar, right?
Oh, that's a nice one.
Each of
Yes.
us. Yeah.
Very true. If this can nudge many young women to do that, it'll be a great one. Lovely. So as a summary of the book, and I can keep going and going on this book for a lot of time, Arti. Uh, Tell us two things that come to the top of the mind as the summary of the book or the essence that any leader should pick up, woman leader should pick up from them.
I think, the book is really a celebration of what women do well and across some of the Asian countries. So I think it's about being more cognizant of what are some of the strategies and some of the skills. And I think the learnings for everybody, not just for women, but for men, for younger people,
Right.
for the West to know more about Asia, for other Asian countries to know about, in Southeast Asia to know about India, India to know about Southeast Asia. So I think there's lots of learnings, and it's really not just about women leadership, but it's also about culture. It's about celebration. It's about resilience. About so many other qualities and strengths that we all have, and that we all need to do more of. I think, if I had to say what are some things that women should do more of, in a sentence, I would say maybe they should have less guilt and more confidence, you know, and I think they should be more strategic going forward, develop a thick skin, and celebrate their uniqueness, and honestly just enjoy the journey, which is something that I don't see a lot of, right? I mean, you see a lot of people just it's always this stress, and there is pressure, and there are deadlines, and there's all these things happening. But I think finally, you only live once, and let's enjoy the journey, and let's celebrate what we do well, and let's take everybody along while we're at it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aarti. That was such a lovely, lovely conversation. I completely enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Rajiv. Very nice. Yeah.
It's a pleasure, and I completely love the book. And I've given the book to a lady colleague, and she's currently reading the book to understand it. So let's wish this book goes and reaches many more hands, and many more women leaders just come out of their guilt, if at all something is holding them back, and then become that leader that they ought to be and they deserve to be. Yeah. Thank you
Right.
so much for doing this. You have a lovely day ahead. Catch you
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah,
Bye
sure. Thanks, Rajiv. Bye. Bye.
bye.